As we've traveled across Ohio this year, I've been honored to hear the stories of so many Ohioans. Too often, regular folks get lost in the discussions about American politics today. There are flashy headlines, and there are plenty of distractions. But we need to talk more about how does an issue like gerrymandering in fair districts impact all of us in our lives, in our schools, in our hospitals. My name is Brian Hambley. I'm a leukemia doctor in Cincinnati. And I decided to run for Secretary of State because I saw the impact that our politicians were having and the decisions they made on my patients and their ability to afford health care and get the right care for their cancer. I believe democracy has to be a discussion about how we build better communities, how we solve real problems, and how we live and work together as Americans. So here we are with Care for Ohio, the podcast. In this series, I'm going to be having conversations with people around our state and around our country about their communities, their lives, and how we build a democracy that works for all of us. I hope you'll join us in the conversation in the months ahead. Welcome to Care for Ohio, the podcast. Today, I'm excited that Beau Bayh has joined us. Beau is a Marine Corps veteran. He is a lawyer, a democracy advocate, and running for Secretary of State of Indiana. Beau, it is a joy to have you on the podcast.
It's a joy to be on here, Brian. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, it's an interesting time to run for Secretary of State in the United States. Can you just walk through what led you to decide, running for Secretary of State of Indiana was the right choice for you at this time? Why are you taking this on?
I have looked at the state of our politics in Indiana and beyond, and too often I'm seeing the folks in our state house use their positions as elected officials to benefit themselves and to not serve the people of our state. And the Secretary of State's office in Indiana is a perfect example of where we've gone wrong. The person in that office has spent taxpayer money on a luxury vehicle for himself, trips all over the world. He's hired his family members. He's just not doing a great job, and he's not a faithful public servant. And I was raised in a family of public servants. I was always told that, if you run for public office, you do that to help people and not to help yourself. And so that's the way this office has been run is not in keeping with that tradition. And I was, you mentioned I was in the Marine Corps. I was an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. When Marines see a problem, they run toward it, they try and fix it. And the Secretary of State's office in my state is a big problem. So I'm going to do everything I can to fix that.
I grew up in rural Indiana, Beau, and one of the first politicians that I actually ever remember hearing about was your father when he was governor while I was growing up. You come from a family of public service, as you just alluded to. Are there lessons or advice that you've gleaned from watching your family in this space?
Yeah, I just always remember why you're doing this, why we all got involved. Why we all put our name on the ballot. Like I said, it is not to enrich yourself. It is not to benefit yourself. It's not to push some ideological agenda on people. It's to make real progress in people's lives. In our state, just as in Ohio, we're facing real challenges here. I mean, our utility bills have seen some of the highest increases across the nation. Our public schools in rural counties are closing. I was in Dearborn County in Lawrenceburg, and I was talking to folks there. There's nowhere in the entire county now for a new mom to give birth in a hospital because they're rural counties. And I don't need to tell you about this. I mean, you're in the medical field. You're an oncologist, a cancer doctor, so you know this all too well. We have real challenges in our state. My family, my granddad and my dad have always taught me, you run for public office to solve problems in people's lives. That's the only reason you do it. And I think just keeping that at the front of your mind when you're going throughout this journey is healthy.
You're so right. In rural Ohio, I visited Hugging Valley Community Hospital 2 months ago, and it's one of these rural critical access hospitals that you know well in Indiana, 25 beds. And the nurses who were taking me around, they said three things really. One, they were just so proud of that hospital that it had held out. The second thing they said is they only have 3 weeks cash on hand as a hospital. It should be 6 months if they were in stable financial shape. So they're just barely hanging on. And then number three, they said that they're 1/3 Medicaid in their emergency room. And so this is not a small issue. This is a huge issue for our hospitals and our local communities. And beyond providing care, man, that's a place for middle class jobs. If you're a respiratory therapist, if you're a nurse at that hospital, you lose that job, and the next rung down, it's not a $30 an hour job, it's a $14 an hour job, and it's tough.
No, that's exactly right. And it's sad in my state. Too often we're seeing bitter partisanship and just ideology get in the ways of solving problems like that. You asked me about my dad and my granddad. They served in an era where working with people in the other party was not seen as some type of traitorous kind of act. They actually looked for areas where we can agree on things within reason, because at the end of the day, uh, your principal job as an elected official is just helping your constituents, right? Get there in a lot of different ways, but rarely does it involve getting exactly everything you want 100% of the time. Rarely in life can you act that way, not have people be upset with you all the time. I mean, in what relationship in life can you expect to just get your way 100% of the time, right?
Absolutely. Well, and solving problems leads directly to the thing I was very curious to get your thoughts on, which was the redistricting in Indiana. And for some of our listeners who might not be following Indiana election law, uh, over the last few weeks, it's really become clear that Republicans are going to try to redistrict in the state of Indiana for congressional districts. Can you just kind of walk us through what's happening there, and are they trying to solve a problem, or are they trying to game the system and gain power? Do you have a thought on this?
Yeah, well, this is a solution in search of a problem, Brian. And just to fill your readers in, because they might not be aware of what's going on, our Governor Mike Braun, called a special legislative session last week, which means that the legislature, outside of its normal scheduled meetings, is going to convene to conduct a vote on whether or not to redraw our political maps in the middle of a decade. Usually this happens on census years because the government wants to take in the population data, and then, at least you would hope, uh, draw the maps in a way that makes sense and keeps community of interest together and things like that, and and provides for fair representation, right? That's what we would all want. But in this case, because of some of the party bosses in DC putting pressure on them, our state legislature is going to vote on redrawing our maps, when they just did that not too long ago, to basically make our elections anti-competitive. I was in Greencastle, Indiana, where there's a small, great school there called DePauw University, and I was talking to students on campus, and I was making a little social media content. I just was interviewing people, and I was asking them, "Hey, what are some issues facing you as a young person that you're worried about?" They would most of the time say things like, am I going to have a good job when I graduate college? Am I going to be able to afford my health care? Is the community that I live in safe? Those are the things that they're worried about. And then I would ask them, I'd say, well, have you heard about this redistricting thing? Is this something you think our state legislature should be prioritizing? And of course, they would say, no, what are you talking about? First, a lot of them had never even heard of it. And then when they're informed about it, it's wildly unpopular. And that is backed up by the public polling in our state, which shows that a majority of Hoosiers, Republicans and Democrats, do not want this. So you have to ask yourself, why is it, given that data, why is our state legislature doing this? It's not to serve Hoosiers. It's to accumulate political power so they can please people in Washington, D.C. And just one more data point, Brian. The last time our state legislature did this, in 2022, following the Dobbs decision to pass a new abortion law, it cost our state taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hundreds, not to mention the time wasted that could be spent focusing on issues that are really affecting people. Right. So it's a waste of time and money, and no one is asking them to do it. But you asked me about the Secretary of State here. If you x-rayed him, you probably wouldn't see a backbone, because he's going with the wind. He hears the orders from DC and he's raising his hand, right? He does not care about the effect this has on our democracy. He's worried about, how am I going to enrich myself, my friends, and my family using my office? He definitely doesn't care about the effects that this is going to have on our state.
Yeah, we have a lot of similar state representatives in Ohio, where I keep wondering, why are they throwing their local schools under the bus? Why are they allowing so many Medicaid cuts to hit people in their districts? Because their voters are getting hurt by these policies as much as anyone else. And boy, having met some of them now, I think a lot of them look in the mirror and they think they're looking at the next Republican governor of Ohio, and they'll sign off on anything that comes from DC if they think it might get them an endorsement to be, a Republican governor in 4 years or 8 years or 12 years. And the sad thing is, for most of them, it's not going to work. and their communities will have bad schools, and their communities will have hospitals that shut down, and that they've just been willing to sell people up the river.
So my state, Indiana, ranks consistently toward the bottom. In fact, 50th in a lot of surveys in voter participation among the United States. Bottom, worst of the worst. And so obviously, as the Secretary of State of Indiana, as I'm sure you will be in Ohio, we should not tolerate any illegal voting, period. We need to make sure that we have absolutely secure elections. That is, table stakes. But also within reason, we should be able to we should do everything we can to increase voter participation among eligible voters. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we do that? What we do not do is further gerrymander our map to make elections less competitive. Because imagine you're in Dearborn County and you're asking yourself, well, should I take time out of my busy schedule to go to my polling place to vote in this election? And you look at the results and you ask yourself, well, these are 30-point elections. Why would I even go, right? It's a drop in the bucket. And that contributes to the voter apathy that we've seen that is driving our participation so low. So this is only going to contribute to a problem. That's a big problem that I want to fix. And there's so many bad parts of this. It's hard to see any type of silver lining, to be honest with you.
Well, in our first episode, Oregon Secretary of State Tobias Reed talked about this, a woman in rural Oregon who is a single mom, working 2 jobs. All of a sudden, she lives, in a mountainous area. All of a sudden, she's got to decide, all right, am I going to go vote in person? What he is worried about for that woman is, well, is she going to take the time off, get a babysitter, lose some income from work, and then show up to a polling place? And in Oregon, the way they solve this problem is they don't have to do any of that. Like, all the registered voters get mailed a ballot on their own time in their own privacy of their own home. They mark their ballot and they mail it back in. And I think Oregon has about 75% voter participation rates in presidential elections. I mean, it's been a wild success, and it was instituted by a Republican in Oregon. The Republican Party was the initial one that pushed it. Finding some folks, who are willing to cross party lines and solve some real problems like this, I think that's a place the Secretaries of State can really add value.
When I was on active duty in the Marine Corps, I didn't have much of a choice, right? I was voting in Indiana elections, but I was deployed or whatever, or in training, and couldn't get to my polling place. So I did not have a choice. And think about, you mentioned the story of that woman. Think about our seniors in Ohio and Indiana who don't have an easy time getting around. This is going to affect at least those 2 demographics if they continue to assault it.
And for any more conservative leaning listeners, you're probably aware that in high voter turnout elections, Republicans do just fine right now. What Beau and I are both describing is an approach that clearly doesn't put the thumb on the scale towards our party. If anything, it might actually hurt us in some elections. But if we're going to be committed to democracy, we've got to be committed to democracy. And so what I hope people are hearing is that there's some voices in the Democratic Party that are open to coming to a table for an issue that we don't think should be partisan. And let's make it easier to vote for everybody, no matter what their party preference is. And I hope we can find some Republicans that'll come sit around the table and draft this out, hopefully across the Midwest.
Yeah, that's right. We can rely on our Midwestern friendliness in that effort. If we continue down this path, what will this race to the bottom? What will happen is we will have very, very few states in our country will be kind of mixed legislature, state government. We will have entirely, and in Congress, we will have entirely blue states and entirely red states. And what will that produce? That will produce more extreme politics in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party, right? Republicans and Democrats alike need to ask ourselves, do we want more extremism, less of a willingness to cooperate with each other, less pragmatism in our government? Is that what we want? Or do we want people that are common sense, that don't view the other side as the enemy, and that are willing to work with folks to accomplish things and help people, right? That seems like a much, much better path to me. And so I would ask everyone to just look at this, not only on principle, but the actual pragmatic, the real concrete effects of this down the road if we go down this path.
You have already started getting miles under your belt traveling around Ohio, around Indiana. Anything surprised you this first month?
Yeah, I was in Randolph County, not so some of these Ohio border counties. I was in Randolph. I was in City. which is a city that encompasses, it's both in Ohio and in Indiana, which is just a funny fact. But I will tell you, what I have seen, and it is great to see this. I have seen not just Democrats showing up at these events, Republicans, independents, and people that have not been political before, right? That have been kind of just turned off from politics, thrown their hands up about the negativity, about the partisanship. We have seen a lot of early energy and support among common sense Republicans and among people that have not always been involved in politics. So that has been really great to see. It's the human element of politics, meeting people, listening to them, figuring out how you can help them. That's the best part about this.
100%. The retail politics human part of it it's just fun. I'll tell you a quick story. Thursday night we'd gone to the Ashtabula Fall County Democratic dinner, and Ashtabula is on the border with Lake Erie to the north and Pennsylvania to the east. And so it's 4.5 hours from Cincinnati. And so when we got the invitation, we thought, boy, it's rural, more Republican county. Is it really, worth driving 4.5 hours up to speak at their county dinner? And we thought maybe there'll be 50 people there. We arrived, there's like 300 people there. And some of them are spouses of Democrats who considered themselves independents or more moderate Republicans. And they were coming to their first dinner in part because, boy, this just doesn't sit right with them. And I think they're testing the waters. I mean, I think those folks are looking for an off-ramp from what's happening. It's a tough movement to leave, the MAGA movement. And so giving them really easy off-ramps and making sure that they know they're valued and that their stories are respected and the stories that we're trying to tell, I think makes all the difference. And boy, if they arrive and they feel like we're looking down at them and want to just like pummel them for, who they voted for in the past, I mean, that off-ramp is close.
Yeah, we should be welcome if you share our vision for a better future. If you share my goal, as I know yours is too, Brian, making government work for people and not insiders and rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in our government. If you share those principles, we should welcome you in our movement, right? There is no place in our party, and too often I've seen this in the past, and I hope this does not happen in the future, to demonize people that don't agree with you on 100% of issues, right? It does not mean you're a bad person. In fact, a lot of time families disagree on a lot of things, but that doesn't stop us from loving each other, right? In the Marine Corps, it's interesting. I was a captain, an infantry officer. You're in charge of a few hundred people. And, people in the Marine Corps, one of the great things about our military is that it draws folks in from every walk of life, every background, big city, little town, look completely different religious traditions, and definitely different politics. I mean, we did not all vote the same, I can tell you that. No one even cared. It didn't matter because we all knew that we had a common mission to accomplish, and we came together to achieve that mission, regardless of any political difference we may have had. It's time in Ohio and Indiana that we bring that type of spirit to our politics, right? Recognize the big things that we have in common, and come together to solve those kind of issues that are affecting them instead of bickering amongst each other about little stuff.
I get constantly asked about the tariffs from farmers who have no idea what to expect with the cost of their equipment, the cost of their seed, or what price they're going to be able to sell at the end of the season. Is that something that's a relevant issue for farmers in Indiana?
Huge. As you know, Indiana, you grew up in southern Indiana. It's one of the biggest soybean producers, not only in the country, in the world. My granddad, we had a farm in Vigo County, Indiana. He was a farmer. My dad was born in that farm, grew up on that farm a little bit. He grew corn and beans. We got to look out for our farmers 100%. The Midwest feeds the entire world. It's the largest agricultural engine in the entire world. And we should be doing everything we can to support our farmers.
My granddad was a small dairy farmer, not a lot of those anymore. Didn't ever consider voting for a Republican from when he got to voting age in the 30s until when he passed in the early 90s. And I think now about, people like my grandfather, who have they been voting for the last few elections? It hasn't been our party. And I think some of that's on us.
Yeah, 100%. I remember, I was a little kid, and I asked my granddad too, because we'd always been Democrats, and I was just curious. I think it was eight or nine. And I said, Granddad, why are we Democrats? And he said, because Democrats fight for the little guy, because they stick up for people who are struggling. He didn't say, it didn't go into some identity of people who are struggling or, although those do exist. He just said, we stick up for the little guy. We fight for people we're struggling. We believe that government can be a positive force in people's lives, right? We got to get back to the blocking and tackling of the Democratic Party, focus on issues that matter to most people, welcome people with open arms when they agree with us in solving those issues, and fight for people that are struggling right now.
Just listening to the way you're describing it, I had lunch a few weeks ago with Dick Celeste, who was the governor of Ohio in the 80s and early 90s. He's worried about, what are the public schools doing right now? That was one of his questions at lunch. And he wants to know, what the hospitals, what is their plan for dealing with Medicaid cuts? And he's just very worried about the nuts and bolts of like, all right, how is this going to work? What are the practical mechanisms to solve it? And when I compare like what a Governor Celeste, who is talking about, when the rubber meets the road. And then I look, you turn on any cable news and you see just the noise. I mean, the contrast between those couldn't be more stark.
All you see is just division, anger, dividing amongst each other, red team, blue team, just no type of willingness to work together. And most people, Brian, I get around our state, you get around Ohio, people are fed up with that. They don't want it. Of course, there will be small minorities on both sides of the aisle that will feed into this type of, resentment for the other side and resentment for people that don't always agree with them. That'll exist. It's always existed. But the majority of people are fed up with the dysfunction, with the self-dealing that we've seen, with the partisanship, and they're ready for a better type of politics. And I think both of our candidacies represent that.
Well, there's two last questions I wanted to ask. One is we try to talk a lot in our campaign about, government is where we're doing together what none of us can do alone. And so we end up doing a lot of events at public parks. Do you have a favorite park in Indiana or national park that you've been to that you like to go to?
Yeah, so we have a beautiful national park, Dunes National Park in the northern.
Yeah.
Didn't you go to Notre Dame?
My wife and I went on our first date to that park from Notre Dame. It wasn't the national park yet; it was a state park at that point. But that was our first date.
So that's a beautiful national park. And then in our state, we have the Hoosier National Forest. Is it a great park in the southern part? You're from Harrison County, so you're probably very familiar with it. It's an amazing natural place to get away, escape to. I'm a big fan of Brown County State Park and Brown County National. Is the biggest town there. Just beautiful, especially this time of year with the fall foliage.
Oh yeah, the leaves. Yeah,
the leaves. I'm an outdoorsman. I like hunting, fishing, things like that. So it's just great places to do that in our state. You mentioned how you turn on the TV and cable news, you go on social media, and it's just so negative. The best remedy for that: go out, talk to your friends, talk to a neighbor, bring yourself back to reality, and get outdoors, get in nature, go for a walk, go for a hike, and just be alone with your thoughts for a little bit and think about the things that are really important to you and not all the noise. I got to ask, do you have a favorite one in Ohio?
Yeah, so Shawnee State Park in the southern part of our state, very similar to Hoosier National Forest in that, beautiful vistas. You can take, 3, 5, 7 mile hikes. There's actually a lake in the middle of it and a lodge right in the middle of it that looks out over the lake. Absolutely gorgeous. One question is, I grew up in Indiana, and I have a lot of Indiana basketball memories. You grew up in Indiana. I'm curious, do you have a favorite Indiana sports memory from growing up, either high school or IU?
My great granddad, he's in the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. Actually, he was a well-known referee in our state and was a colonel in the Army and things like that. So you mentioned, my granddad and dad have been public officials in our state, but I would say the one in our family with the most Hoosier bona fides is my great granddad, because he's in the Basketball Hall of Fame in our state, which is a big deal. I'm a huge Indianapolis Colts fan. I know that's not basketball. You asked about basketball, but our 2007 Super Bowl when Peyton Manning, when we beat the Chicago Bears, that was a seminal moment in my life growing up. And I'm a huge, huge Colts fan. I have a twin brother who actually spent the past 3 years working for the team, and he just left that job. And now the team is 7-1 or whatever they are. And so I told him there's a correlation between these two events. They should have gotten rid of you a long time ago because they had not been doing so well. And then he left, and now they're doing great. But I'm just kidding with him. But yeah, huge Colts fans. That 2007 Super Bowl.
Each time our last question is the same, because we talk about caring for our democracy, and our theme is Care for Ohio. The name of the podcast is Care for Ohio, the podcast. And I'm curious, especially since you're running for Secretary of State in Indiana, what is better care for our democracy? And what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you, Bo?
Yeah, I think it means standing on principle to make sure our democracy is fair, right? Brian, you mentioned it's not partisan. I could care less. I mean, look, I'm a Democrat. Do I want Democrats to win? You betcha. But if a Republican wins, that is fine. I can work with those people. I just want our elections to be fair, right? And that is on principle, standing up to injustices where you see them, making sure that everyone has an equal and fair voice and say in our democratic processes, and increasing participation among people, getting folks energized and interested in the workings of our government to get out to the polls. We have America, Ohio, Indiana all benefit when more people are participating, when more people take an interest in our government. And so, as the Secretary of State, I hope to have a voice in contributing to that and bringing some of our and getting rid of some of this voter apathy, increasing our participation, and getting rid of some of the things that really chip away at our trust in government, like self-dealing and some of the terrible stuff we've seen going on.
It's a vision that I think we can get a lot of people to buy into. And I think we can take that vision a lot of places that Democrats haven't taken it recently. Bo, this has been a wonderful conversation. I so appreciate you joining us. We've been talking with Beau Bayh, candidate for Secretary of State of the great state of Indiana. Wonderful to have you.